Labas rytas, mėly Delfi televizijos žiūrovai. Šiandien su jumis sveikinamės iš vadovų konferencijos EBIT, kur 2 dienas verslo, politikos ir kiti lyderiai kalbės apie svarbiausias tendencijas, kas vyksta, kas gali būti ateityje. Ir šiandien turėsime labai daug pokalbių ir pirmasis iš mano svečių yra Jonas Ridderstrale. Jis yra labai laukiamas konferencijose visame pasaulyje verslo lyderis, geriausiai parduodamų knygų verslo temomis autorius, tad tikėkime, jis papasakos mums daug įdomus. Hello, Jonas.
Hi.
I want to ask, first of all, because if you want to get the right answer, you need to get a good question, first of all. So as today here we have 100 of business leaders, what would be your proposal for them to talk about, to discuss?
I think at the end of the day, an organization today needs to fulfill much more than a transactional purpose. So I guess if we would take your organization, dig a big hole, put the organization into that hole, and then take a huge stone and put on top of that hole, what would the world be missing out on? Because I think an organization today for talent needs to fulfill a role which is part identity bringing. For customers, it also needs to fulfill a role of providing people with meaning. So I think this question of how do we add value, not only in the very narrow economic sense, but how do we add value to the world at large?
And always in your career you are speaking about necessity of change, about how we're brave to do things differently. But there are also another line of another lectors who's saying, where are we rushing? Why do we need to change all the time? Maybe let's stop and just be ourselves. So how to combine that?
Well, I think it's more improvement than change, because change as such is easy. It's only a question of making things worse, isn't it? And then you've changed. And there's no point in changing for the sake of just changing. I would argue that you have to be the change that you want to see in your industry. Because in so many industries, there are companies relying on someone else to be the change. So we're saying, well, it's the new guys coming up with completely new technologies, let them be the change. Or it's our big Japanese competitor that has beaten us up since the 1970s. Let them be the change and we'll be the fast follower. And I don't think that will work, especially not right now, because if we look back to the industrial era, we essentially played a game focused very much on perfecting the known. So it was a question of becoming marginally better at that which we were already pretty darn good at. Today we're playing a game which is about creating the unknown, coming up with things that are not only better, but more importantly different, and that is a very different game.
And what can be that different? You are speaking quite often also about values in our organization. Should we think still just about like money, how to earn more, how to have better profits, or should we speak more about humans now?
Well, making money is trivial. It's not easy, but it's trivial from the point of view that most of your competitors will not actively focus on losing money. So from that point of view, making money does not survive the triviality test as a vision for a company. Money is a bit like love. I mean, you can't pursue love. Love is the outcome of something, hopefully, that you're pursuing. So money can only be the positive consequence of adding value to a specific group of customers. And to a great extent, that boils down to how exclusive is your value proposition, how elastic is your value proposition, because there are still huge cultural differences across the world, and you need to adapt the business model depending on where you happen to be, not compromise it, but adapt it. And then finally, the devil is still in the details, execution. So without an exclusive business model that is elastic enough to be adapted to the varying circumstances that you face around the world and in different customer groups, and without execution you will not succeed.
And what are the most challenges business now meet? Like in doing these things different, the lack of brave, or what happens?
Well, I think two different challenges. And for many companies, they will have to deal with both. The first one is, of course, the impact of new technology and the fact that we're seeing a completely new breed of companies evolve out there. And it may be the likes of these extremely asset-light organizations such as Uber, Alibaba, Airbnb, companies that essentially are using existing infrastructure, not owning it, but utilizing it. And I think we're going to see more and more of that in industry after industry, because with information becoming almost ubiquitous, there's so much info out there that we will see markets for more things and more things becoming available on an as-a-service basis, like Spotify, for instance. Second big challenge is to think outside the business box. Look at Greta. Since I'm Swedish, of course, Greta is very much on the top of every Swede's mind, and in general, I think as governments struggle to deal with the large global, or in some cases pan-European issues that need to be dealt with, and we're actually seeing a de-globalization on the political level, there's a huge role for business to play. The multinational company, to me, is a big candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize, because there is so much real integration of people from different cultures, from different geographies, from different races, from different religions going on within multinational companies. And if business could take on the role of dealing with some of those questions that typically ended up on the political agenda, because if the political players do not assume responsibility, I think business needs to step in and do that.
But is it really necessary for business to do? Because really some businessmen would say it's politicians' job. Why should we do that?
Because it makes perfect sense for business to do it. I think the capitalist always turns humanist, at least the smart capitalist, always turns humanist the very moment it is profitable to do that. And I think if you look at the two major battles that most businesses are fighting right now, there's a battle for talent. Do you want to work for a toxic company, or do you want to work for a company that assumes responsibility for the big issues facing mankind, like global warming? If you look at the other battle, that's a battle for customers. Do you want to shop from a toxic company, or do you prefer to shop, given enough resources, from one of the good guys? And businesses should also keep in mind that we live in an increasingly transparent world. So while today you may very well find yourself in the Hall of Fame, tomorrow, if you don't play your cards well, you're going to end up in the Hall of Shame.
You mentioned the battle for talents, and in a few last weeks I heard different stories from, almost same stories from different businessmen. And we said, yes, we really care about social environment, we are really trying to show how happy we are to work here and trying to show for candidates for work, and when candidates come, and we are disappointed because we understand we also need to work. And so how to avoid this and how to motivate people and showing a job is not only fun?
I think it's a question of instead of sending out job descriptions, making sure that you get your people to send in motivation descriptions. I mean, on an individual level today, you must figure out what makes a single person mad, sad, and glad, what makes a person tick. And that may be a whole variety of different things. But you can limit some of that complexity by trying to figure out how do we build a successful organization, a company of not only three prima donnas, but three prima donnas that can actually sing the same song together. And to me, that boils down to hiring people for attitude and then training them for skill. And I think in the past, we had a great tendency to hire people for skill. Let's bring in some smart engineers, the highest grades, and then we can brainwash them into believing what is right now in our company. I think smart organizations today do the reverse. You bring in people with the same norms, the same kind of values, the same attitude, and then you train them for skill, because the half-life of knowledge is coming down, and it's coming down quite dramatically, so we can no longer believe in recruiting someone 2019 and him or her having the right skills 10 years down the road. I think Herb Kelleher, the guy behind Southwest Airlines, the first sort of original low-cost airline in the world, says it pretty well. He says, we hire attitudes, because you can take someone who's a great people person and turn him or her into a fantastic pilot or air steward or stewardess, but if someone has an attitude problem, it doesn't really help how good a pilot he or she is if you want to work in a company like ours.
What would be your advice for business leaders who come back after this conference? Which factors we should check? Is everything with the organization good, or they should start some changes?
I think, and I didn't talk about that today, but to me it's fairly obvious that the big winners, given the developments that we're seeing around the world right now, are women. This is going to be a woman's world. It will not happen in 5 years, it will not happen in 10 years, but if we look 20, 25 years down the road, women will take over. And I think all organizations today should see this as a mega opportunity. How do we make our place a hyper-modern organization that becomes a magnet for women? Because if you fail in that department, I think none of the other stuff will really matter, because at the end of the day, you need top talent, and most of us. It's so obvious if you spend a little bit of time on campuses around the world. Who do you meet? Well, you meet women. We know what young women are up to. They are studying to an extent that we never ever witnessed before. What the young guys are up to, we don't know. Drinking beer, watching Sky Sports, playing World of Warcraft. Women, definitely. That would be my top priority already next week. Think about how to become much more attractive for young women.
Very good advice, I really like it. Yeah, okay, so that was all. Thank you for a very interesting conversation. Ačiū visiems žiūrėjusiems ir greitai grįšime su kitais pašnekovais.